Probably about once or twice a year, a game just comes around and grabs my attention and won't let go no matter how hard I try to ignore it. This was originally going to be a video on why I love the Flood as an enemy, but YouTube decided to recommend me this. And I was instantly hooked with its colorful and out there designs. No Straight Roads is made by a small company in Malaysia called Metronomik, headed by Juan Hosmer, the lead designer of Final Fantasy XV. The company came in with the hopes of incorporating music into video games without it devolving into a rhythm game like Diva Project or Osu. Instead, they wanted the music to be heavily involved, but still allow more generalized gameplay to be the forefront. Did this idea come to be realized? In short, kind of. But before you continue to watch this video, I highly recommend you play the game for yourself. It's a very short game, only lasting me about 6 hours, and I was taking my time and replaying missions. It's fun and quirky with some blemishes, but ultimately deserving of your time. You can pick it up for $40 at the Epic Games Store, the PlayStation Store, and on the Nintendo Switch. With that out of our way, let's set the scene and start with its story. No Straight Roads follows a very simple setup. Vinyl City is powered by music, literally. Electricity is made by things called quasi, which only starts up from music. NSR is the leading company in energy production, and because of this, they basically govern the whole city. Anyone who works for them is a top-selling superstar, with one catch being that they all produce EDM, other known as electric dance music. Our two main heroes, Mayday and Zook, quickly learn this the hard way, and after a power outage that takes all the power away except from NSR buildings, leaving the poor people in the dark, Zook and Mayday, other known as Bunk Bed Junction, decide to hijack all their concerts and put them out of business. This plot serves its point very well, by giving the player a clear motivation without any convolution. Simply challenge these bosses, defeat the big bad company, and save the day. There are a few plot twists near the end, but nothing that muddles the general theming of the game, which in an age where story has to be deep and full of plot twists to be deemed good, this was a breath of fresh air for me. The journey the player goes through is a straightforward one, clearly laid out in the beginning with the highlighted 6 bosses. Are you noticing a pattern here? We live in a world where extra fat is often treated as bonus content, and depth, No Straight Roads, goes straight to the point, and that point is to have fun. Your first fight out of the tutorial is a boss fight, and you know what? It's this boss fight.
Your endeavors mean nothing when 1 billion stars and thousands upon thousands of planet games.
NSR plays like a boss-themed beat-em-up. In fact, it sits in the middle point of No More Heroes and Fury. Every boss has specific mechanics to them and many phases. They often get more ridiculous as time progresses, much like No More Hero. Though besides the finisher that occurs at the end of every fight, there aren't any quick time events, something very prevalent in No More Heroes. Instead, every fight relies on the basic mechanics the players taught from the very beginning. From character to character, it works like this. Mayday is meant to be the offensive force of the duo. She deals more damage per hit, she attacks slower, but has combo finishers at any phase of your string. These can be hard to fit in tight spaces, but will do a lot of damage. She also has the largest pool of shootable objects, and when fully upgraded, she can restock hers and Zook's entire ammunition pool in one parry. Her last notable feature is her transformations, which are started by using the transform button pronk near any metronome on any map. All of her transformations tend to make guns of some sort, which deal minor damage to enemies and bosses. Zook has the more defensive capabilities of the two. He attacks much faster and can end combos whenever he wants to, but deals significantly less damage per swing when compared to Mayday. Instead of a large supply of ammunition to shoot, Zook gets skills that give him meter or health whenever he successfully deals damage or completes transformations. Speaking of transformations, Zooks change a lot depending on the boss, though they always have some defensive identity about them. For example, this one slows projectiles down, while this one sucks up harmful projectiles and turns them into ammunition. They both promote different playstyles, with Mayday being risk-reward and Zook being slow and steady. These playstyles ultimately change in viability depending on the boss, as they all push different limits on different phases. For example, Mayday is probably your best bet during the 10-10 fight, due to the fact that one of the only ways to get damage during the first phase is by parrying attacks. Since she has the ability to restock ammo, she can punish this phase far better than Zook can. On the contrary, Zook does very well in the Sayu fight, since the main idea behind the battle is to slowly add more and more things for the player to dodge, meaning they will have to fit in attacks in increasingly smaller windows the longer the fight goes on. Zook's faster attacks and ability to cancel combos whenever makes him the far safer choice. Now, what I said sounds really good, and on a surface level seems mechanically deep, in theory, but the general gameplay design does suffer from some problems that I'm afraid patching probably won't be able to fix. The idea behind a game where combat is progressed through music is nothing new. Crypt of the Necrodancer has accomplished this feat many years ago, but one of the key differences here when compared to NSR is the fact that all actions, including movement, is attached to the beat. NSR only has enemies throw out attacks on the beat. The player can go off beat whenever they want, and they often will, especially when they are new to the game. Not being forced to move on tempo, the rhythm of the level can get muddled and players can easily find themselves getting into bad scenarios. Add in sound effects from attacks and the constant quips from your playable characters, and the sound can turn into quite a mess. And in a game where that sound dictates damage coming the player's way, it creates a chronic problem where players are encouraged to make as little noise as possible and stand in corners. Current no damage speedruns show off this tactic perfectly, as making too many moves is inherently too risky. Enemies only attacking on beat leaves problems as well. Because enemies have strict attack patterns, it doesn't allow for much player interaction. Of course they need to dodge and parry on beat, but these rigid attack patterns mean the enemies can never be knocked out of place. This is a problem because combat feedback practically doesn't exist. When playing something like Streets of Rage or Devil May Cry, enemies go into long stun animations to signify that they are taking damage and to allow players to pull off combos. In NSR, enemies take the damage on the chin, making your attacks feel like you're cutting through air instead of smacking enemies. This isn't as big of a problem when it comes to the bosses, since it's understandable a powerful enemy could shrug off normal attacks, but it just doesn't feel right when a normal drone doesn't care that I'm slamming my guitar into it, or the fact that Eve can keep performing a triple axel while Zook is literally beating her over the head with his drumsticks. There's also an odd problem with player movement being far superior to everything on stage. Once the player unlocks the jump dodge, pretty much every boss can be cheesed by spamming those jump dodges. But this is only a slight nitpick since harder difficulties tend to punish spastic movements. So, gameplay is flawed. And after all, gameplay is the main thing we are doing in a video game. So why should you spend your time and hard-earned money on this game? Well, it's literally everything else. Very seldomly do we see games that are worth the price tag simply based off its art design alone. Games like Miramasa, Gris, and Machinarium all use heavily stylized art designs that work incredibly well to fit their moods and atmospheres, while something like NSR is appealing to the more colorful and loud audiences, probably attracting people who enjoyed games like Jet Set Radio and Lethal League. They both have artistic appeal, just in different ways. NSR's style appealed to me and reminded me of those old, early 3D consoles, when they were more willing to take risks and were attempting new IPs. You know, that phase in time that just had a huge rush in platformers, even though a lot of them didn't succeed. To say the very least, I enjoy the more out there designs of the characters. Everyone has a different colorful skin toning and freakishly large hands. There's a clear and distinct look to every boss and side character, making them easily memorable even weeks after not having played the game. What I find most appealing about these designs, besides the way they actually look, is the amount of depth put into each character, especially the bosses. Some are designed to be ironic, playing fun at the character's ideals. The first boss you come across is by far the easiest, yet he thinks the highest of himself and has the biggest goals. Some bosses go for more social commentaries, like how the boy bands are pretty much produced in factories designed to appeal to women, or how sometimes the parents pushing their child prodigies are doing it far too hard. But what was most surprising was their ability to tackle mature themes like depression or family infighting. While we don't get a long look at these characters, we do get a taste, and it does feel like we are seeing a real person with real problems, and not just cliches that have a couple lines of dialogues people hold on to for years and years. It's not just the character designs either. Arenas you fight and help tell their stories, like how DJ Supernova, who thinks so highly of himself, is the center of the universe on his stage. DK West turning everything into hyper-stylized Malaysian art, so we can take a quick look into the roots that made Zook and DK West. And just the sheer design of Eve's arena is amazing! Her gallery reflects her feelings towards the different characters. For Zook, it's a far calmer atmosphere with white flooring and walls, which a quick Google search says the color is often used for purity in media. This is in stark contrast to Mayday, whose arena is red, chaotic, and has limbs growing out of the walls. It's chaotic and unnerving, which reflects Eve's general dislike of her, and it only gets worse as the fight continues. All this just gets better when you add the music too. Mayday's side has chaotic dubstep sounds that contrast with the general flow of the 80s synth pop, while Zook has a calmer drum backing to it. And speaking of music, this game has some banger tracks, and I know music is subjective, but these songs are genuinely good since they source the OST from multiple artists. 4 to be exact. To be able to source multiple artists and the game still have a musical identity that sounds coherent and not a muddled mess is an impressive feat, and one that pays off since multiple genres all get proper representation. Like, Jesus, I didn't realize how many different styles of EDM existed out there, but there are 6 boss themes all incorporating 2 extra remixes per track, so that just means 18 boss themes alone. And they have some range. This cutesy Vocaloid song gets a Vaporwave remix, while DJ Supernova's Funk Jams get a club remix with the voice backing. And the classical piano gets a full-on dubstep track when picking its remix. All of this is great, but what makes it even better is how the original versions of the songs will remix between rock and EDM, depending on how well the player is doing in the fight. It's a fantastic system, and the music is just so upbeat and catchy that it's hard for me not to get a stupid grin on my face when I'm able to fight bosses on beat. If the gameplay was lacking, then NSR's art and music are trying its hardest to carry the show. Is art enough to justify a purchase of a game? This is the main question I'm asking here, and I can't answer that question for you, but I can vouch for my personal tastes, and in this case, I would argue yes. Listen, some people love games that focus primarily on the art design alone. If it wasn't for this fact, then games like Miramasa and Journey would never have garnered the fan bases that they have today. NSR is a game certainly carried primarily by its art, music, and interesting gameplay ideas, and while it is most certainly a flawed game, it is still one I have the utmost respect for. Metronomik is a company that deserves praise. They took a chance on creating a new IP that's colorful, weird, and charming despite its blemishes. They have also proven to be a company that cares about their product post-release, having made very transparent vlogs on the state of the game and even having Juan Hosmer teach struggling players tips on how to beat one of the harder bosses. No Straight Roads isn't the best game of the year, but at least for me, it's been my favorite game of the year. Thank you for watching, please consider subscribing, and I hope you have a great day.